Do you agree that there is climate change? In America, there is a strong lobby for anti-climate change initiatives. For climate change initiatives, so they oppose steps that were what that the American government want to take to reduce CO2 emission, for example, from vehicles, from power producing plants and all that. So they have a strong lobby there. So what reasons do they usually use to say that there is no climate change? Okay. So the first excuse that they usually use is they will say that the rising temperature that we are experiencing is cyclical. That means it's normal. Maybe in a maybe as a decadal event or a longer term event. The rising temperature we are observing, we are seeing now is just a normal cyclical nature of the weather. Okay, that's why they use this as one of the reasons. Okay, so how did how did the climate change proponents overcome this? They overcome this by measuring over 600,000 years the CO2 and the temperature. Yeah. So ice cores. So they were measuring ice cores. So they take ice cores. Okay. So they can penetrate deep into the Antarctic. What happens is in Antarctic you have snowfall. So when you have snowfall and fresh snowfall upon the old one, as they compress the snow, it will trap the air. Okay, so what they do is they will cut the cores into uniform lengths, so that, and then they will slowly melt it and analyze the released gas. So they measure the CO2, also the oxygen 18 and 16 isotopes in order to estimate the temperature and the CO2 concentrations. So, but whenever you do this, you have to have a standard curve. So what they do is they use the recent the data that they have recently and they calibrated it, and then they did the whole analysis up to more than around 600,000 years. Then from here they can see that yes, there's cyclical event, but the recent the recent temperatures and the CO2 that we are observing is way beyond the cyclical events. Okay, that means there is no doubt that what we are experiencing here is has never been experienced before by Earth. Okay, so that's why the anti-climate change arguments that what we are seeing is cyclical is not true. Okay. Second is usually they will talk about what we are observing is actually urban heat. Okay. So they are not saying that this is not actually climate change per se, but more because of urbanization, the reduction of plants, jungle and the increase in concrete building, covered surfaces that cause uh, an increase in heat generation, urban heat islands. So that is the argument that they use. Of course, in cities where there is less greenery, the temperatures will of course be higher. But what we are observing now is throughout the world, even in jungle and even in areas far away from the urban city areas, we are also experiencing climate change. Okay, the effects of climate change. Okay? So now all of us agree that there is climate change occurring. Okay, so the next question will be why. So this one, okay, CO2 increase bring about the greenhouse effect, right? Okay, greenhouse effect means the trapping of CO2 within our atmosphere causes the Earth to have higher temperatures. Okay. Okay. And the next question I ask is why is this increasing? Anyone?
Human activities and also increase in human populations.
Okay. So you're relating this to human population. So now it's about 7 billion. So maybe about just 100 years ago, it's maybe about 3-4 billion. Okay. So definitely an increase in human population. What else? When you look at the details of the CO2 concentration, you realize that the tremendous increase in CO2 concentration now is about 4 parts per million. Okay. Last time, about three. Okay. So the increase that we've seen here actually occurs only in recent years, maybe around 1880s onwards. Okay. So they are able to link this with industrialization. The beginning of industrialization, especially in the British Empire, the yeah factories and machines. So other than this population, what do you think caused the increase? Deforestation, yes, but this is also related to the increase in population because, and also related to industrialization. Deforestation occurs because increasing human population requires places to stay. Okay, also requires to consume resources that can support the human population, and also resources for industrialization. Okay, but the forest is important because it absorbs CO2. So the lack of forest causes the CO2 to increase. What else? Burning of fossil fuel related to industrialization and also cars. Okay, so this caused the increase in CO2 emissions. You must remember fossil fuels are brought up from Earth, inside Earth. Okay, so we mine for petrol or for fuel. So if there is no burning of fossil fuel, everything should be in balance, including the CO2 concentration, because whatever CO2 that has been produced by the heterotrophs should be taken up by the autotrophs. Okay. However, fossil fuel is an additional input. So fossil fuel is an additional input. Why do I say that? So if there is no fossil fuel burning, the carbon cycle should be balanced. The emission and the absorption should be balanced. You must remember that fossil fuel is from within the earth. Okay? So when we remove something from within the earth to bring it to the atmosphere and we burn it here, so we are contributing new carbon to the atmospheric equation. That's why when we burn more fossil fuel, the CO2 in the atmosphere increases tremendously. Okay, that's why a lot of initiatives to go into electric cars, hybrid, hydrogen fuel. Basically, they are trying to reduce fossil fuel burning. All this, especially electric and hybrid, still runs on electricity. And electricity is, in most nations, electricity is still generated by burning of fossil fuel, either coal or gas. Okay, in Malaysia, coal and gas producing uh, power plants utilizing coal and gas is still one of the major portions of the electricity produced in Malaysia. So if you want to reduce CO2 emissions by using hybrid or electric cars, you have to find a way to reduce your reduce your dependency on coal and gas for your power plant, for your electricity generation. If so long as you don't have a renewable energy solution for producing power, then this one doesn't really work. Other than so, if this one doesn't work, probably the best will probably be public transport or mass transport, because when you have many people taking the same transportation, the amount of carbon dioxide released per person per capita is decreased. We all agree that there is climate change. We state that the cause of climate change is because of increasing CO2, and we looked at the sources of CO2, the reasons for this. So, so now we know that CO2, yes, is increasing. So, what are the effects? So, I've already mentioned the effects of this are warming, rising, and souring. Okay, so warming means the increase in temperature. Okay? Increase in the average temperature, annual temperature over time. Okay, so this is a definite reality now. Okay, so the last few years we have been recording record-breaking temperatures. So with warming, we have loss of habitat. So when we talk about loss of habitat, the first thing that comes to the mind will be the polar bears. Okay, drought in selected areas. Uh, intense rainfall, intense rainfall. So it's very, as I mentioned, certain areas will have longer droughts, certain areas will have increasing intense rainfall. So when the rain comes, it comes heavily, comes quickly, and with that, of course, you will have flooding. So this is what we are observing in Europe, in America, in the South America, even in China, in Malaysia also. Okay, if you remember the devastating floods in Kelantan, 20, is it 2014? Yeah. So we are observing this. We are seeing this. What else do you see? You see the loss of, when you say loss of habitats, also loss of glaciers, loss of snow caps. So even in Greenland, the glaciers are melting, the snow ice cover is decreasing. Same goes for the North Pole. Okay, so as I mentioned, the North Pole, now you can traverse the North Pole by ship navigation in summer. Okay, previously it has never been done because it was too dangerous, and usually there is ice lock. Okay, so there is no free passage for the ships to go by, to go past North Pole. So why is this a potential game changer? So if you look, we have the North America here, South America here, you have Europe here, Africa. Okay, so now most of the navigation is either through the Cape of Good Cape of South here in South America, South Africa, or through the Suez Canal, okay, to go to Asia. So if the ships can traverse here across North Pole to Asia, so your traveling time will decrease tremendously. Okay, so if navigation proves to be safe and possible during summer, more and more ships will begin their navigation patterns through North Pole. So what will happen then? If the ships can travel from Europe to China, for example, so they don't have to go through Singapore. They don't have to go through Port Klang. So the attractiveness of Singapore as a trading port is decreased. So it will have consequences, okay, especially to nations that depend on trading ports for as an economic activity. Okay. So other than loss of habitat, intense rainfall, drought, we also have the we have species migration, especially the tropical species. The one topic that is most most studied is mosquitoes. Okay, so there is evidence that the mosquitoes are migrating northwards and southwards away from. I mean, their habitat has increased. Their habitat space has increased. So with mosquitoes, they bring about diseases. So that is also a important point to consider. So Of course, as I mentioned, with warming, ice will melt, then you will see sea level rise. Okay? So if you have water, you pour it nearly full, and there are ice cubes inside. When the ice cubes melt, will it overflow? If I have water here and I have ice cubes here, when the ice cubes melt, will it overflow then? Examples of North Pole versus South Pole. That's why uh, melting ice is more crucial for uh, if melting ice occurs significantly in the South Pole, it will bring about a faster rate of sea level rise. So we're talking about sea level rise as opposed to North Pole because the ice in North Pole is already in the sea, whereas most of the ice in South Pole is on the continent, on the Antarctic continent. That's why when the ice melts here in the South Pole, it will enter the sea and cause a sea level rise. Sea level rise causing the destruction of nearshore habitats, also low-lying islands, island populations, island nations. Okay, so some of these island nations are already no longer present. Some of them have already migrated. Whole nation migrated to America, for example. But these are small population, so yeah, that's why America took them in. So you have sea level rise. So in Malaysia, sea level rise studies are usually done with modeling. So they'll look at the contour of the coastal geomorphology to see the slope, the and and then to estimate if the sea level rise, how much of the land area will be inundated. Okay, so how much of the land will be filled will be covered with water. So in Malaysia, area of concern will be Kelantan, Kedah, and parts of Sarawak. Souring. What is souring? So the pH of the sea is around 8.3. Average pH around the world. So when we're talking about souring, we're talking about the reduction of pH. Because CO2 enters the sea, it will form carbonic acid, and this will dissociate into bicarbonates and carbonates. Okay, so there's a net reduction in pH when you have more and more CO2 dissolved in it. But when we're talking about souring, we're not really talking about acidic pH. So now, if you're talking about nearshore pH, then it's about 7.5 or 7.7, okay, especially for our waters. So the net reduction overall here now is about 8.1. Okay, so the reduction here will cause problems for organisms that is dependent on the carbonate cycle, for example, coral reefs, and also other organisms that have shells, calcium carbonate shells. So marine organisms, for example, coral reefs, and also marine organisms that have calcium carbonate shells. An example would be your theropods. So they are the ones that are most fragile, most vulnerable to the change in pH. So scientists have found out that there is evidence that the bones of the fish, otoliths and all that, are now also more brittle, more there's a change. They have observed a clear change in the bone structure, the bone density and strength. So so we are seeing real effects from the climate change, from warming, rising, and souring of the seas. Okay, what are the mitigating factors they can think of? So mitigating factors are what are the steps that you can take to reduce the to reduce uh, climate change. Says efficient. So basically, if you are able to reduce consumption, you will help a lot. Reduce consumption of electricity, reduce consumption of goods. Because when you reduce consumption, there is less need for production. I mean, if there's if you reduce consumption, of course, there is no need to produce so much to to supply to maintain your consumption. Okay? So less production will also result in less destruction of natural resources, less consumption of electricity, energy. Okay, so reduce consumption. So this is one thing that everyone can do. Every one of us can do this. Reduce consumption. So don't buy what you do not need. Don't buy too much. Use what you just yeah basically reduce. Then of course yeah, reduce, recycle, reuse. Okay, these are steps that you can take to reduce consumption, reduce your carbon footprint. The carbon footprint is the amount of carbon used uh, in a process. So if you can reduce this, then you are decreasing the pressure on Earth, on the resources on Earth. Yeah, and it is probably more sustainable and more environmentally friendly when you do this.